Good afternoon, and thanks, Kamara, for this very nice presentation, and thanks, Ingrid, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to participate in these inspiring conferences. It's my second time, and I'm really glad you invited me again. So now, well, I should talk about vision-led and audience-focused organizations, institutions. So first of all, let me tell you that I'm talking from the point of view of cultural institutions. This is important to be said at the beginning in order to avoid misunderstanding. And let's say that I do not agree on this definition of audience development, and that's why I put it at first, because then you will see my favorite definition of audience development. So here it is said that audience development is an activity, and I have already problems with that, which is undertaken specifically to meet the needs of existing and potential audiences, to help cultural organizations to develop ongoing relationships with audiences, with the key purpose of increasing them. Well, I put 3 question marks there because I'm not absolutely sure that this is actually the goal. It might be one of the goals. Actually, it is one of the goals, but it's not the main one. So I don't really think this is what we should go. We, I mean you. I'm not a cultural institution. I'm just a researcher, but let's say we, and you understand what I mean. I'm not really sure we should go for it. We shouldn't simply fill the bowl with fishes. We should not grab people and force them into our theaters or museums. We should offer opportunities to everybody to enjoy arts and culture. This is what we should do, I think. So I will start from far away, actually, because this is why I think this is our duty. This is Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. So I'm going back some decades here. What does it say? Well, what does it say? It says that everyone has the right freely to participate in blah, blah, blah. But just focus on this idea of the right freely to participate. So it's actually a right that we are providing, a right that we are underlining. This is our mission as public institutions, because another thing that I should have said at the beginning is that I'm talking about institutions, and I'm talking specifically about public-funded institutions. Another framework text, I like to build framework, otherwise practices to me remain like, bubbles in the middle of nowhere, so I need hooks to anchor practices. So this is the first hook. The second one is the FARO Convention. You might know it. It's a document which was prepared in 2005 by many countries participating in the Council of Europe. Why is it important? Because it says that heritage, tangible, intangible, is not important in itself, but it's important because of the meanings and uses that people attach to it. This is quite a revolution in our world. It was a revolution. And it emphasizes very, very strongly and very, very clearly the role of heritage communities and the principle of shared responsibilities, underlying the fact that communities should also be part of the management of heritage and share the responsibility of this activity. So these are my 2 theoretical, let's say, hooks. But why have I started working on this issue of audience development? As Kamara said, I was involved in a study, which is the study on audience development commissioned by the DG Culture of the European Commission. Why did they commission the study? Not to spend millions of dollars, as Alan said, because actually we're not paid millions of dollars, unfortunately. We should move to America for those things, probably. But anyway, why did they commission us this study? For 2 reasons, mainly. The one is the underpinning idea that these activities are funded, in many cases, with public funding. So there is an issue of social responsibility. If we are using public funding, then these things should be relevant for society, or if not for all society, let's say for the majority of society, because we are all taxpayers. But then we confront ourselves with these data. This is a Eurobarometer survey. I just took the part of those who visited a cultural site. But let's say that figures do not change really dramatically if we think about theaters or other cultural activities. What can you see here? Well, you can see that you are among the good ones, those who are doing very well. But if you look at the rest of Europe, well, we have a problem here. We are using public resources to fund something which is not relevant for the majority of people, because otherwise, how could you explain these figures? So that's why actually the European Commission was quite worried and said, okay, we have to work on this issue of audience development, but what does it mean? Have cultural professionals, cultural institutions really understood what audience development is? I can tell you as a result of our study that no, there is a great misunderstanding here about audience development. But let's go to it later. First of all, we try to understand why are we in that situation of having all those pale blue countries. But even the dark blues, I mean, we are talking of 50%, more than 50%, but still we are not talking of, the majority of people. Well, I guess all the things which I will list here have to do with societal changes. So we are dealing now with a world which has been changed very, very quickly. We have heard also this morning things related to that, so I'm going to not to stop on many of these things. Explosion of information. We have heard beautiful presentations this morning, so I'll go quickly here. Digital opportunities. I can't, add anything to what has been said. Opportunities and threats. Vast choice of leisure pursuits. This is also something, competition. We have heard this morning this word. Perception of relevance. This is something we have heard from Alan during the last part of the morning. I really think this is our major problem here, the perception of non-relevance, actually, of the majority of people. So it's a matter of how we convey the messages. Democratization of culture and participation. In Europe, we have done great efforts to this respect in the last 50 years, 60 years. We have achieved great goals, but still, the figures, the pale blue countries, show that there are still things we have to do. And then we live in a society where more and more there is this idea that there is no objective truth. And this is a challenge for institutions which for centuries have always thought that they own the objective truth. And visitors are those who should come and learn the truth. So it's a very, very challenging issue, the last point here. I will give you some very, let's say, clear examples about these societal changes. I live in Rome. I'm an archaeologist as a background. I've heard many times people saying, oh, what's that, XX? In archaeological museums, I mean. Or in art historical museums. XX, actually, is 20 in Roman numbers, as we all know, but it's becoming a problem. It's a code that is not really fully understood nowadays. Or, at the National Gallery of London, I've heard somebody asking the guide, yes, we are in the Flemish room, but what does Flemish mean? And the lady was almost fainting, and she had a reaction like, oh, if you don't know the word Flemish, why are you here? Which is exactly a sort of answers we shouldn't give, but it is a problem. Or in a natural history museum, extinction does not exist. Evolution does not exist. And scientists were obviously, having an heart attack. But, these are, matter of fact. To me, it happened this in Rome. Somebody asked me, okay, now we are looking at the Colosseum, but which one comes first, St. Peter's or the Colosseum? And you know that, in these cases, you think, oh my God, where shall I start from? Because, it can be complicated. So the problem is we have to be aware of that, I think. And we have to answer in, let's say, comprehensible ways which take into account the diversity of people. We have heard Andrew this morning telling us that people are diverse. We cannot tackle them individually. We can try to tackle them in segments. This is a beautiful example of segments in a museum, I think. If you read the text, there is that one over there, I need a bench badly. I think it's great, Why is it interesting to me? Because obviously it tells us that people have different needs and we should be ready to comply with different needs. I am 14 and I'm here by force of my parents. Just to talk about teenagers in museums. We had a very nice session about museums and teenagers, but this is something which happens. We know that, we are familiar with that. Maybe to a certain extent, there's nothing we can do about that, but at least we have to be aware of these things. Let me go. People want to be engaged. In terms of marketing, for example, this is a campaign of the Met. What did they do? They asked people to take pictures of themselves in front of a work of art that they had chosen in the museum. And then they selected, obviously trying to imitate the work of art, and then they selected the best pictures and made the campaign, It's Time We Met, which is obviously a nice game with the words, using these pictures. So people want to be considered, they want their needs to be taken into account, they want to be active actors of within the institutions. So what can we do? We have to consider that the experience of people in museums, in theaters, in cultural sites, cultural experiences in general, take into account our personal context, our physical context, our social context. I will go quickly also on that, because we have heard this morning about the importance of the social context. We had wonderful examples of that. But this is something that two museum researchers told us in the year 2000. So we know these things already from many, many years. So we should be aware of that, I think, by now. They also told us that we should use the Maslow pyramid in order to understand that if we do not fulfill the basic needs of individuals, they will never go up to the higher levels of the pyramid, to our cultural satisfaction or self-actualization. But, poor guys, we are in a changing society, so now we have other basic needs which added at the basis of the pyramids. It's a bit sad on the one hand, but it's true. We all know that this is true, and probably it's even more true for younger generation. So how many things should be taken into account by poor cultural institutions? Well, I would say very many, but this is why I don't like the previous definition and I like this one better. Audience development is a planned process. You have to decide what you want to do, with whom, who are the audiences you want to get in touch with. It takes time, it doesn't happen by itself. So it's not an activity, it's not an event, it's a process which takes time. Because you have to establish relationship with people. This is what audience development is about. It can be about increasing audiences or strengthening the relationship with existing audiences, or you can decide to diversify audiences. Fine. Whatever you decide to do, it's fine. But how do you decide whether to go in one direction or in the other or in the three of them? You decide it according to your mission, to what you exist for. So, of course, we need time, we need a strong focus on the long term. Of course, we need to place the audience at the heart of the organization, as the famous above-mentioned study on audience development states very clearly. But this is all nonsense if it's not related to the mission of the institution. And here, we have to be clear about what are first things which should come first. To be absolutely clear about why you exist. This is it. If you don't have it clear, then audience development is a nonsense, because it's a strategy which has to be developed within that framework. And I put in red the last point. I mean, they are all important, but the last one, an organizational culture of and agreement to place your audience at the heart of everything you do. Fine, but it has to be shared as the mission of the organization. Otherwise, there is, here is where it gets blocked. So he told me to keep on pushing. Okay, great. So mission and vision are very important here. What are they? I'll try, let's see, yeah. Well, we know what they are. This is just a refresh for you. So mission is a precise description of what an organization does. It has to do with the present of the organization, why the vision is actually a future picture of the organization. So this is the definition of mission. And this is how mission and vision are related together. Why am I stressing that? Because again, during the study, we saw many, many examples of organizations developing strategies on audience development without having really clear what their mission was and how far they could go with audience development. Because it's always a matter of balancing the mission of the organization and the strategies of audience development. So this is how it should work, mission, vision, and core values. We heard this morning Andrew talking about values. Well, in this case, these are the values of the organization, which are really the central core issue here. The mission shapes our today, the vision prepares us for tomorrow, but without values we don't go anywhere, and we know that. So now, this is a very interesting idea, the concept of the hedgehog. The fox knows many things, the hedgehog knows one big thing. Guess what? What does the hedgehog know? What do you think? He knows how to survive, basically, which is, the main core business of the hedgehog. This is a fragment from a tale, a Greek tale, an ancient Greek tale, which has been taken by this philosopher who has been using it for different purposes. But now I need it just to tell you that you should use the three mission, vision, values to focus and to find where the three things actually intersect each other. And this is your core business. And audience development has to be placed there. It has to be linked to your core business. Otherwise, it's just something useless. So that's why I always say audience development cannot be considered as marketing and communication. Marketing and communication are tools for audience development, but audience development has to do with the vision. So it's important to see what is essential and ignore the rest, or at least, let's say, this is a bit too radical, let's say to prioritize what is really important, also when you deliver your own audience development strategy. I'm almost there. So I would like to go back. Where is the bus going? When you start thinking about your organizations and audience development, you should ask yourself this question: where am I going? And answer these questions, which are obviously related to everything you do. I mean, these are related to organizational culture. So nothing new under the sun. But the important thing is that these are relevant also for audience development. Audience development, it's not something that you can separate from these 9 questions, okay, to be effective. And why? Because we go back to this. Audience development is about public service. We are serving people. We are embedded in this idea of public service. And audience development is just at the core of it. I'm here if you have other questions or if you want to email me about that. I'm very happy to answer all your questions and curiosities. And now I go sitting on the sofa and I leave the floor to Andrew again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, I think what you've given us is a really kind of big overview of the ideas of what it means to put audience development at the center of an organization. I wanted to kind of come at a slightly different angle, but I think with some similarities. I want to share with you a model that we built actually with a museum, which is the Western Australian Museum in Perth in Western Australia, obviously, and which really looked at why they existed. And it kind of asks the same question, which is, what's the point of your institution? But to echo a couple of the points, pick them up, this is the problem. Audience development's biggest problem is that it gets trapped in the marketing department. And sometimes that's because the marketing department latch onto it and keep it, and sometimes it's because everybody else just delegates it to the marketing department. Let the marketing department do it, they do audiences. And so no one else has to worry about it because somebody's taking care of it. But it actually affects everybody, and it should be owned by everybody. And this idea of being vision-led is crucial. The organization needs to articulate what it does, who it does it for, and why it does it. And if the organization is not articulating who it's trying to reach, who it's trying to engage with, then how does it know whether it's succeeding? But we aren't asked this question: what's the role of a cultural organization in the 21st century? What's interesting is, anyone been to Perth in Western Australia? Oh, a couple of people waving at me. It's a very strange place, isn't it? It's really, really weird. It's one of the most remote places. Now, I think Perth is officially one of the most remote cities in the world. It's nearer Singapore than Sydney. It's just not near anywhere. And Western Australia is got a really booming economy, hugely booming economy. And it's mainly because you name anything that you can dig out of the ground, and they're digging it out of the ground. And they're selling it to the Chinese as fast as the Chinese can buy it. And that's creating huge revenues. And the government is taxing all of those sales. And so the government has huge amounts of tax. Does this sound familiar to Norway? Okay. And so the government is worried that Western Australia is going to become some kind of giant mining camp where people just fly in, do 3 weeks in the mines, and then fly away again to wherever they came from. And they want people to live there and work there and bring up families there and live there. And so they want to make Western Australia more attractive. I love the idea that they've got all of this tax money burning a hole in their pocket. They desperately want to make it more culturally, more attractive, and they think that the best way to make it attractive is to build a new museum. I think that's fantastic. I want to know the person who persuaded the government of that's the case. So they gave the museum, there's already a museum there, they gave them 428 million Australian dollars, which I don't know what that is, 3.5 billion kroner or something? I don't know, so it's a lot of money. And most people who've been given that kind of money to build a museum go straight for the kind of superstar architect or they run some kind of competition, and they'll get some amazing architect who will build some kind of incredible upside-down thing, and then some poor person has to work out how to put a museum in it afterwards. And they didn't do that. What they did was, Alec Cole, who's the director, asked this one question. In his case, he said, what is the role of a museum in the 21st century? We know what the role of it was when we built this one in the 19th century, but what's the role of it now? You don't bring your thing to identify it, or you just look on Google. So what's the point of a museum? And they didn't go out to architecture or anything like that until they'd answered this question. And we helped them to answer that question. We started by asking the staff, 250 staff, across 6 sites. And then we started by asking the audience that they had, and then we started by asking the people who were not in their audience, but who they would like to be. And it was really interesting, what we built. Now, we didn't set out to build a model. I'm going to show you something. It looks really neat. It looks really like it's from a textbook. I'm going to tell you that we built this thing out of Post-it notes. And we had 2,500 Post-it notes. The staff helped us get that down to 400 that they kind of made statements. And then we managed to get the 400 with duplications down to about 90. Now that sounds good, doesn't it? I got 2,500 Post-it notes down to 90. You try sorting out 90 Post-it notes on a big tail. It's impossible. You couldn't work out how it works. So we were looking at these 90 Post-it notes and moving them around, and they were starting to lose their sticky. And we couldn't, all I really wanted to do was write some kind of 2-page report to say, this is kind of what people said. I was just looking for some way to organize my list. That's really all I was doing. A week later, I had a model. So what we worked out was that some of the statements were about this idea of belief. We believe in this, or there were like values. This is what we hold true. So there were very big philosophical kind of statements. Some of them were more like personality traits. We're bold and adventurous, or we're authoritative and whatever. So, and some of them were much more like the promise, like what do you get by engaging with us? We, open your horizons. We do this, So we realized there were some different kinds of statements. So we started. Well, that's an obvious way to group them. So we started grouping them like that. But then when we started looking at these groups, we thought, oh dear. When we looked at these values and beliefs and philosophies, we thought, there's quite a lot of different things in here. It's not like all one voice. It's like, seems to be quite some different things going on. And I had this horrible, horrible day when I thought, what's happened here is no one inside this institution agrees what it's for. There are like several different versions of the museum. And they're actually in, opposition to each other. And probably for the last 20 years, there's been some kind of truce while they all just got on with it. And nobody mentioned this, so they all just kind of worked. And what I've done is I've done this workshop process with them where everyone says what they think, and now it's said and it's on a piece of paper and we can't unsay it. But I now can't put it back together again because I've now revealed the huge differences in their belief about what the museum is. Actually, we resolved that because what we realized was that these were not alternative museums. What they are different roles that a museum can play. So it was just kind of interesting. So when we looked at these statements, and they're so different, I just started putting them in a line. These ones are similar, and that's a bit similar to that one, and I'll move that one over here. And what I realized was I ended up with a bit of a spectrum. With, you could kind of read along the line and they all kind of link to each other. But by the time you got to the other end, this statement was quite different from that one. And I did that with the belief statements, and then I did that with the personality statements, and I did it with the promise statements. And then when I did it, I thought, oh, that's good. And then when I read down one end, and then I looked at the other end, they actually were quite similar. And they were quite similar. So I now had rows, and I also had some columns. So if you've got rows and columns, you've got to make a table. So that's what we did. And the table ended up with 5 columns. And these are the 5 columns. Excuse the Norwegian. It's the best we could do. So in English, at least, the first column is deliver, which is really just about existing and having expertise and knowledge and being the organization. Now, this is museum context. If you're a dance house or a theater or an orchestra or whatever, you can simultaneously translate that. I've shown this to all kinds of performing arts organizations. Just go, yeah, totally get this. The second column in form is about engaging the audience that's the usual suspects, the typical audience who want it already. Involve is trying to get out beyond that audience and really engage people. And then we've got co-create and empower, which are different. I'm going to show you. So, I don't know if you can read. Is that readable from the back or not? You will get these slides, by the way, so don't worry. So I'm going to try and explain what it says. This belief statement is museum knowledge and research underpins our civilization, which is like a big idea, isn't it? We collect material culture, we hold things in trust on behalf of the future. And it's all about knowledge and expertise and authoritative authority, I suppose. We're a trusted expert. We are a storehouse of knowledge. The museum is a storehouse for objects and knowledge, probably on a hill with big pillars. And we're authoritative. Our expert knowledge is credible. We are keepers of the flame. This is very Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's for the future. And we're a big institution and a single authoritative voice. Now, this is the kind of definition of a museum. Now, if you were an orchestra, you could have your knowledge about music, your music direction, your virtuoso skill set, your library, all those things that make you into what you are, your content expertise, if you like, would probably fit it in if you were a performing arts organization. But if that's all you are in that column, it's very difficult for the audience to engage with you. Other experts could engage with you. Other peer groups could engage with you. People really, really in the know could engage with you. But it's actually quite hard because you're this big, impressive institution. So nearly everyone is in this second column, which is about it's about engaging with the people who want to be engaged with. So the core audience for dance, or in this case, museums. But this is interesting. The belief is different. It says education sets you free and improves your life. So this is about attending the arts, visiting culture, exposing yourself to culture, and then it makes you a better person. And so in the museum context, this is reading all the labels, going on the guided tour, reading the guidebook, doing as you're told. In a theatre, it's strap yourself in and watch that. It's good for you. And we become a benevolent educator. We have all of this knowledge and expertise, and we're going to share it with you. We're now going to give it to you. And if you listen carefully, you'll now know what we know. We're a center for learning. We're going to open your mind and expand your horizons. And we're on a bit of a mission to explain it. Here it is, and you can know as much as we do. And this time, instead of it being an institutional offer, it's about you as an individual. You can come in here and you can learn. But it is really about learning. It's about training. And a lot of art forms are like that, aren't they? Classical music's very much like that. How many classical music concerts do you have to go to before you pass the test of being able to go to a classical music concert? It's that classical music marketing that just lists the pieces, and possibly in K minor, op 394. And some people go, oh yes, I love that one. And other people just go, I have no idea what that is. This is about serving the usual suspects. And you will get some people, but you'll get many. And as well as the people who want to come, you'll get the people who are forced to come, usually school children, are made to come and do this. So museums particularly, and I think a lot of other arts organizations are moving into this third column now, Involve, where it's different again. It says museums inspire curiosity and fire the imagination. Okay? And so what this is about not formal learning, sitting there, this is good for you, you can learn it. This is about making this much more engaging, much more involving, much more fun. So in museums, it's all the hands-on exhibits. Column 2 is all about the glass cases. Column 3 is all about the hands-on stuff. Dressing up, smell it, touch it, whatever. And so we're an inspirational storyteller. It's a portal to an amazing world. It's immersive. We make learning and discovery fun and magical. It's hands-on, it's minds-on, it's a very social experience. So we've made this into somewhere that feels more welcoming, feels more accessible, feels more involving. You can take part, you can get involved in some way. You don't feel you're just kept at arm's length. You're welcomed in. And so what happens here is this unlocks quite a lot of the wider audience who now see this not as difficult, scary, off-putting, but now see it as, oh, we could do that, this is fine. So in something like classical music, this is probably like an outdoor concert or a fireworks concert or it's all of the formats that we've gone through to try and make this different. It's those concerts they're playing where they're trying to widen the repertoire to make it more recognizable, to move out of the kind of difficult box into the kind of you could take part in this. And nearly every museum is now moving at least some of its operation into this box. You go to museums now, it's all touch and smell and taste and dress up and whatever. And that was started by Exploratorium Science Center in San Francisco. 1969, they were the first people to put hands-on exhibits on the floor of the gallery, and now everyone's doing it. So this is great. Now, when we said to the museum staff, describe this new museum, when we've spent $428 million, and we've got our new museum, what's it going to be like? And what they described was this, because the leading museums in the world have kind of all normed on this. But this is now going to be 50 years old. This, since Exploratorium did it in 1969. So we said to them, do you want to be the last great one of those museums? Or do you want to be one of the first of a new kind of museum? Plus, we also had some other post-it notes left, so we had to have a fourth column. So, and the fourth column is co-create. And this is totally different. I mean, this is a step change. So in this particular case, well, what's interesting about the first three columns is, this is the museum's not really bending. The museum says, we are the experts. We've got all of this knowledge. We're just going to successively find more engaging ways of delivering it to you. But we're still downloading it to you. You're just sitting there or coming in, and we are sharing our knowledge with you, and you're leaving with our knowledge, even though we made it fun. In column 4, what's totally different is we start to acknowledge that you are not a blank canvas. That the visitors coming to the museum, and I think that'd be the same for performing arts, have experiences and ideas and questions, and maybe they've got their own objects, maybe they've got their own histories, maybe they've got their own value systems, maybe they've got all kinds of things that they're bringing with them. And they're going to make meaning from the experience through the lens of their own experience. And we're acknowledging for the first time that that's happening. It's not just you're blank, we're the thing, now what do you think? It's you're you, we're Rose, let's exchange. And so we're saying we're a generous partner, and really this is about building community. It's about sharing identities. It's about what does the world look like from your point of view, this is what it looks like from our point of view, and people meeting each other and exchanging ideas. So we're actually creating, and even if in performing arts, if it's a piece of work, this is the discussion and debate that's generated around the work. It's what does it mean to you? How did it speak to you? What's it about for you? And so this is allowing the audience in, potentially even into the process. And so we might be actually making the experience with the audience, or the experience itself might be the process. And so what we're doing here is we're creating civic space where people can share and meet and build community. And this is a very different purpose for a museum than delivering their knowledge in ever more interesting ways. And then we have this fifth column, which is called Empower. And this is very different again. We're not just building, in the first three columns, we're downloading knowledge. In the fourth column, we're building community. We're strengthening society, if you like, by building bonds between people. In the fifth column, we're actually engaging in society, not just in community. We're shaping society because it suggests at the top that sharing ideas builds an empathetic and participatory society, and that the museum is going to become the space for that discussion and debate. That we're going to curate that debate. We're going to talk about the past and the present and the future. We're going to bring the artistic process, or in this case, our historical collections or whatever, to bear on that debate. We're going to be provocative, but we're also going to create a space where you feel safe. You may feel challenged, but you feel safe. And you will not be judged. You can make up your own mind. So what we're creating is a space in which the ideas that will shape society in the future are rehearsed. And forged even. And that voices that are not heard yet at the moment, or are underrepresented in our discourse in our society, will be the ones that we bring to the fore, because people haven't heard those voices before. And so we need to bring those voices into the discussion and debate. So this is radical. So as we move across, we begin with our expertise. We find ways to disseminate it in ever more effective ways. Then we start to think, actually, this is about building community. And then when we get to the right-hand side, it's about shaping our future society. And this museum stepped up to the plate and said, we're going to do all 5 of these. In order to make ourselves relevant, we have to be in all of them. Because these are the 5 roles that an arts organization can play in the 21st century. Now, in order to do the 2 right-hand columns, you need to have authority. Who are you to say you're going to set up this debate? Who are you to say you're going to curate it? Well, you're the experts. You derive that from your knowledge and your expertise and your status and whatever. Other people are welcome to have a go as well. But actually, it's the authority that you derive from the left-hand side, your knowledge, your expertise, your practice, your history, your status, your standing, that allows you to do the things on the right-hand side. So the curators who were very much focused on the left-hand side and very nervous about the right-hand side, what surprised them was the people who were wanting to do all the outreach and the diversity and stuff on the right-hand side were saying, we cannot do this without without the authority and the knowledge and the expertise that you bring. And so suddenly we'd split this museum apart, suddenly we'd put it back together again, because what we were saying is different people across the institution have got different roles to play, but actually we need all of these roles because they're interdependent. The right-hand side is not better than the left-hand side, it's just different. The right-hand side cannot exist on its own without the left-hand side. The left-hand side on its own doesn't engage anyone. The right-hand side on its own doesn't have the authority or the power to do it. And so the institution started to look at why it exists in the world. And so it won't be the same for every institution. You have to have your version of this, or you have to work out, well, what does that mean for us specifically? But if you're the orchestra in Detroit, you're going to have a very different view than if you're the National Gallery in Oslo. But the point is that these are the 5 things. Does this make sense? Yeah. And it's a kind of evolution, but we're not leaving the left-hand side behind. Yeah? So I just share this with you because I think it's a really great way of challenging your institution to decide what its role is. Okay. Oh, sorry, I should have said, we can map culture segments onto it. I would say that, wouldn't I? The research showed that culture segments have a predilection to join in particular columns. So do that very quickly. Essence, equally happy poking around in the really tough stuff, and also want to be there when you have the societal debates. Perspective and enrichment, like the museum as it is at the moment. So they're the traditionalists, and they're the ones that they're quite happy delving in, they don't need a lot of help. Entertainment and affirmation join in when you make it accessible. Expression love it when it's all about people and ideas and communities and whatever, because they want to be part of that. And stimulation want to be there when the fireworks go off. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Cristina. Now we have 15 minutes left of this session before we take a break. So you guys can ask each other questions, and I will be standing over here with the microphone, so if there are any questions from the audience, I'll come running.
Water is there. Yeah, thanks.
Were there any questions from the audience?
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Then you start.
Let us drink first. Okay, so I shall start now. She is starting, great.
Yeah.
It's very interesting with these 5 pillars, very understandable. But do you believe that they will manage to do everything without getting back to the same conclusion?
I think that they're by default in the first couple of columns anyway. You get those for free. Most people are dabbling in column 3 in some way by trying to get more audiences. Anyone's just trying to grow their audience is probably already in column 3. And column 4 and 5 are the difficult ones, and some organizations are having a go. But this is, what you're saying about it being, you've got to put it at the heart. What a lot of organizations are doing is they're letting a small bit of the organisation have a go in column 4 and 5. The education team are doing some kind of community outreach. And they're quite happy to let you do it, but it's not going to affect anything that they do. And so when you detach it in that way, it's hard to sustain it. It has little effect. Where it has real effect is when the organisation adopts the model like this and says, yes, we understand where that fits into what we do, rather than, oh, they do all that outreach stuff. And maybe you get a grant to do it with, you get money, and when the money stops, it stops.
If I can add something on that, you're perfectly right. The experience I've done during the study on audience development showed us exactly the same thing. And I can give you a very practical example of a contemporary art museum in Rome. They have the education department dealing with kids, with schools, which is obviously their traditional, let's say, core business. And then they have created this public engagement department. And we thought, oh my goodness, this is a perfect example of audience development to diversify audiences. And then we went to interview them, and we realized that the public engagement department is made by one lady who strongly really believes in the importance of engaging different groups in society, but the direction of the museum is absolutely not at all involved in these activities. And they tell her, okay, do that with refugees, with migrants, with people with different needs, but do that on Saturday and Sunday when we have less tourists here, otherwise it's not nice if we mix the groups. So this is exactly what happens. It's not sustainable. She will retire soon, and the public engagement department will die immediately after, because it's not at all embedded in the vision of the organization. So.
Who's next?
I can't see. You are dead, tired.
Can you, I mean, I'm sorry, I
No.
mean just about my model, but can you, did you find it easy to locate or map your own organizations onto that and have a think about why you are where you are and how you might go next? Does that, anybody want to share that with us, where you think you are?
I told you. We killed them.
Yeah, we have. Oh, no, there's somebody waving at me over there.
No, she's alive.
It's really hard to see with the lights, but please. Sorry, I think there's a microphone coming, so.
So I work as a volunteer in the Mass Museum in Antwerp.
Great.
And I recognize our museum very much in your spectrum. But then I forget that it's not easy for every museum. In Mass Museum, we do a lot with the community. For example, we had yesterday Dia de los Muertos in the museum. So it's a Mexican feast for those who doesn't know. Yeah. And for example, because there will be a new exhibition next year about festivities, we asked people to bring something that's valuable for them, to remind for a family that passed away or something. So we try to invite the community to come to our museum and to participate with the collection and everything. So, but yeah, I think that's not easy for every museum, and sometimes I forget that. So yeah. Yeah,
thank you for that. That's a really great example. I think that, but building on your point before, is that if you're just passionate about some of this and then you get on with it, or you make it so that your department does this bit, you know, I'm not saying there's no value in that. Obviously there is. But unless the organization does it as an organization, yours was an extreme example, it literally will retire with you. But it is a whole organization process. And what's interesting is I've taken a number of organizations, not just museums, but theaters and art centers and other orchestras through this process as well. And they start off really not getting it. And what's really great about the process is it involves everybody, And by the end of it, they've mapped their aspirations for the organization onto this. And it's kind of, there's a moment of reveal, really, where they realize how they're going to measure their impact in the world. And so I'm going to say at the moment, I think Swedish museums are doing this better than anyone, better than the UK, better than the States. There's a number of Swedish museums pushing ahead with this. And the key thing with them is that they're locking in the outcomes that come from the right-hand columns. They're locking those in as the key performance indicators for the organization. And that's now what they're measuring themselves on. But the one department, whether it's marketing or education or outreach or engagement, can't do that on its own. It has to be the whole organization does it together.
Yeah.
Another question up here in the left.
Where are you?
Oh yeah, right at the back.
Ah,
Hello.
okay.
I'm just curious, without having my facts straight, I think that this room is filled with a lot of audience development workers, and we all agree about this.
I can't hear you.
I think this room is filled with a lot of people who work with marketing, audience development, exactly. We all agree on this. But the point is, how do we start participating with the rest of our organizations? How do we get them to engage in this? That is the real issue. So should we go as a whole industry? Or which way forward to get the whole organizations in the culture field to understand this?
Well, I can answer according to what we discovered in the study. We discovered that what you are actually evoking is a sort of organizational change, which is actually the basis for everything we discussed so far. We discovered in the study, doing the study, that there are two ways for organizational change to happen. Either the organizations are under pressure by external factors, so there are fundings or schemes or call for proposals or whatever, or political indications or whatever you want to call them, that push them into a certain direction, or it happens by leadership. We discovered that leadership is a very, very important factor. It is crucial to have leaders within the organization that can push this process forward. Otherwise, in the majority of the cases, it doesn't happen, and you end up with the frustration you were just indicating to us. I am now involved in an audience development project with theaters. I am doing a self-assessment exercise with all of them. I was in Barcelona 3 weeks ago. I met the staff, the whole staff, and they were all telling what you said. We are marketing, communication, production, people working in different departments. We really believe that we should cooperate and do things together. And then the director, in the end, he came to the meeting and said, yes, fine, interesting, but we stage what I like. And I don't care about the public, the community, the involvement, the diversification. I put on stage what I decide and what I like. So if it's like that, it's completely useless, and you're right, it's a never-ending fight.
I just jump in to add to that, which is, I think that's right. The two biggest drivers are external policy and context and visionary leaders. But there is a third way, which is the one thing, sorry, do you want to jump in? Please. Okay, all right. There is a third way, which is one of the things that the kind of people that are in this room are allowed to do is visitor research. That is the Achilles heel for the organization. So because you are allowed to do visitor research, that's in your area, you could start asking some very interesting questions. So what we would typically do is to say, we want to do some measures of success. We want to do some measures of success for the organization. And without having an official process that's either driven by a funder from outside or driven by a leader from inside, we, in a rather maverick way, would go to the leaders of the organization and say, right, so, even if it's just the curator of this exhibition or the artistic director of this show or whatever it is, and we say, so what is it exactly that you were hoping for? What outcome did you want? What reaction did you want from the audiences? What do you want them to think, feel, know, do, whatever, yeah. And it's quite interesting because they will actually say, well, I want people to think this, and I want them to recognize this, and I want them to know how to do this, and I want it to transform their lives, and I want it to, because they will talk about their art in that way. And you can say, brilliant, that's fine. So what we'll now do is we'll devise a list of questions which asks them to what extent it transformed their lives. And so all of the things that they said they wanted, we'll document them and go, these are the 7 things that you said you wanted. We'll go and ask the audience, did you get that then? And then the audience says no. We go, oh, that's a shame, isn't it? Because you want to do the whole thing, and 13% said yes. So what are we going to do about that? So you can use research insight as ammunition or as leverage. Even if you're just sowing seeds or you're poking in, you're actually challenging the organization to say, how are we measuring this? I know that that's not giving you power, but it does give you a certain amount of influence.
Yeah, and you have to keep on fighting for sure.
Okay, we have 1 minute left
and
4 questions from the audience.
Wow.
So does anybody of the conference hosts, Ingrid and Nils, do you default your question, or are you insisting on, you default yours? How about you, Ingrid?
I didn't have a question, actually.
No? Then we'll take the question from the back here. Ask the last one. You can take it in your closing arguments. You have time. Yeah. Here you go.
Yeah, I want to turn this problem, to call it, a little bit upside down, because I represent an organization with performers. And obviously, the people who work full-time with all these things, as we discussed in this, and also kind of understand how the world is changing, but not necessarily the performers see this. And the focus is quite a lot on what we want to perform, what is in it for us. And to really, and also thinking about, I'm not running a big orchestra, but in the big orchestras, this is probably a big challenge in many places, because it's a really long tradition. So how to get this, you can't say, you need to understand. So it has to come a little bit from this resource that is so important there. But if they don't get it, what do you do?
Okay, Cristina, Andrew, you have 30 seconds to answer that.
Go on. Go on.
Well, it's a very interesting question, because creativity obviously cannot be caged somehow or cannot be ruled. It again depends on the organization, though. I can tell you that there are, for example, theaters which do not hire artists or performers if they do not want to engage with the public. There are theaters who say, okay, we don't care because we privilege the artistic side of it and not the relationship with the public. So it's again very much depending on the institution and on its choice. If we talk about institutions, then of course, on the side of individual artists, performers, this is a completely different thing. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I think there are 2 types of artistic directors and curators. The ones that just have not really thought about it. They think that their work is moving people and having all of these effects, but they just don't have any feedback. And so for a lot of that, it's just about bringing them together. So going back to my research idea, I do lots of work where I just bring the programming artistic staff into contact with their own audience and facilitate conversation. And because that's illuminating. And for some of them, it really is, it has a tremendous effect on the way that they think about their work. For the second group who, let's say it like this, they believe that a minority of the population is capable of understanding what they do. And everyone else isn't. And therefore, if you want to engage with them, we're going to have to dumb down our work to their level. We bring those people together with the artistic directors. What they almost always say is, that was an amazing discussion. Where did you find those people? We said they were just from the audience. And we say, no, but they were so intelligent. No, they're just from the audience. No, but they were really articulate and interested. Yep, they were just from the audience, yeah. What did you think the audience was going to be like? So there's this myth, which is the audience isn't capable, but the audience, never underestimate the audience. The audience is perfectly capable. They just lack knowledge and experience and confidence. So I think you can change artistic directors' minds by exposing them to either the audience themselves and or feedback from the audience, whether you do it in a conversation, in a survey, and however you do it. I think that's the most powerful ammunition we have.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Cristina.
Thank you.
See you guys.